The views and opinions on Where Did the Road Go belong to those making them. Do not mistake allowing freedom of speech for agreement.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Seriah.
So I am here on this edition of Where Did the Road Go with Vincent Treewell.
Hello, hello.
And Adam Sayne.
Hello, Seriah. It's good to be here.
So Vincent, you had a little health scare.
I did. I haven't talked a whole lot about it. I did 2 Facebook posts. That's exactly what I've done. But on September 22nd, I was getting ready to watch the Green Bay Packers, and I suddenly found I no longer knew how to operate the remote control, which is something I do literally every single day of my life. Then I felt the worst headache I have ever felt in my life. Like, basically somebody put a hatchet through the top of my skull is what it felt like. Right about then, my son showed up because he'd come over to watch the game. And I have no recollection of this, but he said I spoke rationally for a few minutes. And then I started talking gibberish. And I realized I could no longer speak in words. He called 911, and the paramedics arrived very quickly. And they kept trying to get me to say very common phrases, like the early bird gets the worm. And I could not speak in words. I knew what I wanted to say. I never lost consciousness, and I never, was shut down. I just couldn't make my mouth form words. Also, my head was killing me. And they took me to, my son mentioned that the last words that he could understand were me saying stroke hospital. And that's where they took me. Okay. So they put me in the ambulance and took me to the local stroke hospital. Because there is a difference, and kind of public service announcement. If you have something like this happen, some hospitals have what you could call a stroke antidote, but not all. You want to make sure you go to the stroke hospital, not just to any hospital. They were very good about it. They took me right there. And during the ambulance ride, things started to clear up. And by the time we got there, which was not long, maybe 20 minutes, I was actually able to speak almost as well as I normally do. And my headache had settled down to a regular headache and not, my head is going to come off. But they kept me for about 24 hours. And they said that I had an ISA, for lack of a better term, a microstroke. Wow. That a blood vessel in my brain had become clotted, but my body had cleared on its own. So that was a real wake-up call.
I'm sure.
And yeah, it was... I did not feel panic at the time, but later it was kind of like, man, that could have been really bad. I got an ultrasound of my chest, and the cardiologist said there's nothing wrong with your heart, you're fine. And I got great, now I'm going to blank on the thing, but where they put you in the tube. MRI.
Yes.
I got an MRI of my skull, which that's a blast. I recommend no, it sucks. Okay. Because your head's in a tube. But I got through it, and then the brain surgeon, because she's literally a brain surgeon, came and saw me and said that, oh yes, we can tell that you have cholesterol buildup in the blood vessels in your brain, which was amazing because my cholesterol in my blood right now is fine. I'm like where I'm supposed to be. But I did have really high cholesterol for several years. And that's probably how it built up. And so she said, yeah, we can tell that happened. And she put me on some good medicines that should solve that problem. Nice. But it was still, it was an experience. And since then, I'm almost back to 100%. But they said there'd be fatigue, and they weren't kidding. There has been fatigue. I'm not able to do everything I could do in a day just now, but I'm all right. And I don't want anybody to worry about it. I didn't talk about it a whole lot, but I just, for those who I'm not on Facebook with, who aren't on Facebook at all, this is kind of a good opportunity to say, yeah, that happened to me. I'm all right. I'm fine. I'm gonna be in Nashville. But yes, it's gonna be okay. I don't have any, existing, carrying on effects.
Good.
I am on good medication. But yeah, that was a big event that happened in my life, and that was a good place to share it.
And I rarely look at Facebook, and it never showed me your posts. So I realized at some point, I'm like, wow, Vincent hasn't written recaps. That's odd. Because you've been doing the recaps for the show now for years. Which
is my pleasure. I love doing that. And I was just, I was pretty busy, having a micro stroke back then. But I did catch up, though. We're almost fully caught up.
Yeah.
I think I owe you one.
Yeah, there might be.
Vincent, I'm very glad that you're okay as well. I saw your Facebook post, and I was, immediately concerned. And
thanks a lot, man.
I think I responded that to get well soon with it, and I'm glad that you got through that and that everything's okay. But I'm sure that it was something that was really, really scary, and definitely not something you want to go through again. So we're definitely glad you are doing well, and you sound great.
Yeah.
So, thanks. I appreciate it. Good. Hey, the outpouring of support has been awesome. I really appreciate all the people who've responded and those who have heard of it, because like I said, I didn't really put it out there a whole lot, but it's been great. I really do appreciate that. So yeah,
most welcome, and I'm glad that you're going to be here. I'm glad I'm going to get to see you in a few weeks.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, so we should say we're recording this on the 9th of October. I'm not sure when this is going to air, so. You guys are talking
years before. I'll see him at the Strange Realities Conference on November 1st and the 2nd.
It's gonna be great.
If not, then I'm probably if it airs after, then I'm in a stupor and no one needs to bother me.
Adam, you're one of the few people I know who has been continuously doing a podcast for longer than I have, because most of the people that I know started up afterwards.
You two guys are like the elders of this thing, People who've been in the field longer usually don't have podcasts because they come from a different generation.
I mean, Banal's been doing his thing forever, but I don't think he does it. He doesn't do it continuously, does he?
Banal has been doing it since 2006. So really, I mean, he's got us both beat as far as that goes.
But he doesn't.
He's taken, I think in 2018, I think he laid it down, and then he's taken it back up periodically, and he's been back doing it for a good solid year now.
But doesn't he do it?
BLA revival.
Doesn't he do it sort of as seasons?
Yes, he did. I mean, he did it a season, so he'd take like a few weeks break and then start like a couple of months or 2 months thing, and take a break and then come back with it.
Right. Okay. Thought I was remembering that.
Also has a significant position with Coast to Coast AM now.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, he does. He has for some time. Yeah, he's the news editor for Coast to Coast.
And I think Greg Bishop's been doing Radio Mysterioso longer than us.
That is true. He's probably been doing it longer than Banal. I mean, I'd say he's been doing that since probably the late 90s, since when it was probably on recorded on a cassette tape somewhere.
But he also doesn't do it continuously and just kind of does it when he feels like doing, especially now, fortunately.
Right.
So you're approaching episode 500?
Yeah, man. I'm in the 490s right now, and we're approaching episode 500. I mean, it's been pretty amazing. I mean, it's been pretty amazing ride. Lot of cast changes. I mean, Sir Phil now has been doing it with me for nearly 6 years.
Yeah.
And really 6 years, because 2018 was the first. He showed up around episode 200. So, but it's been it's been an experience, man. I was talking to Timothy Renner on his show, not to repeat, cross too much between the shows, but I felt in 2012 when I started this thing, I felt like I had missed the boat, and it was oversaturated then. And I felt that it's too late for me to start a podcast, but I did it anyway because I had been listening to podcasts and I've been inspired by a few, like Future Quake and some other shows that were out there. But yeah, it's just, now it really is oversaturated. Now it's just crazy how many podcasts there are, and it's a definitely different environment as far for podcasts as far as like than when we both got started. Really 10, 11 years ago.
The problem is, okay, so if you're famous, you have a built-in audience, and everyone now who's, an actor or wrestler or whatever has a podcast.
Right. The Hawk Tua girl has a podcast now.
Of course. But that's the thing, like anyone can do it, but getting that exposure, you need help with that. That's the hard part nowadays, because it is so oversaturated, and because there's so many commercial things out there and AI created things out there, and it's crazy and very
it's insane. It's insane how much I'll be watching like YouTube, and I'll be watching something. I watch a lot of history related content. I listen to a lot of history related content too, but there's this one channel that I was watching, and I'm like, this is done by AI. This is an AI voice.
Yeah.
This guy is just typing this in, and it's just reading this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And you just like, you can tell because sometimes it mispronounces things wrong. It
doesn't space things right.
Right.
Yeah.
People have become just, I think, lazy with it now, to where it's like they just like these automatically AI produced YouTube videos that are out there. It's just crazy. I mean, the information is good. The information is solid, but it's just that, they're not taking the time to do it themselves. Just let the AI do it, and then like just run with it, get thousands and thousands of views. It's crazy.
Well, especially if you don't put a lot of actual content into it, just, get the right keywords, get the right, title.
Right.
And I've seen a bunch of them that are literally just made up nonsense. Like the AI is making up stuff, and it's like, what was one of them? It was something about like this lost civilization that was found, and I was like, oh, what's this? And I click on it, and I'm watching, and after a few minutes I'm going, they haven't given a single piece of information about this civilization. Like, it's like politicians talking. It's all like no specifics, no details, no nothing. And I'm like, they did give the name of it. So I Googled the name of it, and it doesn't exist. And I'm like, so what? AI just made this up, and they just did a completely AI generated lost civilization video, and the thing has, 500,000 views.
Yeah.
Well, that's
crazy.
AI, as I think both of you have pointed out at some point in time, is not really artificial intelligence.
No.
There is no brain there. We didn't make a brain out of computer chips.
No.
It's mimicry. It just says sound like a person giving a podcast on this topic. And it does. It sounds like it, but it's not. And that's a big problem.
Yeah.
It's regurgitating what people put in.
Yep.
Yes. I'm sorry, but just as part of the oversaturation, let me just blow my own horn for a second. I am coming up on 100 episodes.
Nice. I was going to ask.
So I've got that going for me. I just did one with Guffey, and we're already set a date to do another one. And then I have other stuff scheduled beyond that. So I'd like to, and I really was on track to, before everything happened, hit 100 before I hit Nashville. But what it is, wherever I come in, it's right close to 100. I can tell you, I didn't know podcasts existed until 2014. When I listened to the most mainstream thing possible, which was Serial, produced by National Public Radio.
Right.
And I got really into that. In fact, I was listening to every episode of Serial and another podcast that was about Serial, like recapping Serial. And that's how I came from totally knowing nothing about anything and not knowing that this forum existed. And then after I was done listening to Serial, the first season, I Googled, well, gee, are there paranormal podcasts? And they gave me some guy named Seriah Azkath.
Nice.
Well, I'll give it a whirl. What the hell? And that worked out. Yes. That worked out.
And here you are today.
You came up pretty close thereafter, Adam.
First of all, I remember episode 100. I remember I had a big party, and like we were at Rob. We're at Rob's house then. That's where we did it. Rob's was my old like producer and co-host, and we did it over there, and we had like this big party. We had this like whole big to do. We did that for episode 200 too, but like when I hit 300 and 400, it was just like, oh my God, I'm at 400. Jeez.
Awesome. I don't count my episodes, so I have no idea what episode number.
Yeah, you're probably around about 1,000. But I'll tell you.
Well, it's well over 600 for public shows. If you add in the Patreon stuff, it's well over 1,000.
I'd say that's probably true. And we're probably really over 500, really, because we did a lot of like bonus episodes.
Okay.
We had this like we were getting ambitious. We do like these like 30-minute bonus episodes, and then like kind of got burned out on that, so we stopped doing it. But so there are some non-numbered episodes, so we're probably really hitting at 500 now, if you include those. And then we've got Patreon content too, so that's definitely there. But since Vincent was talking about his memory of going on Where Did the Road Go, or finding Where the Road Go, like I'll tell you how I found it. Like 2015, and like so it's hard to believe that's almost going to be like 10 years from now,
right?
In a few months. Is like I remember I was home. This was the time period we were both on Rocky Stucci's.
Oh yeah.
Can't remember the name of it now, but it was a network.
Yeah.
He were on. He had like a little app that you could listen to it on.
Wasn't Intrepid Radio, was it?
What was it?
Intrepid? Or was that the magazine?
Well, Intrepid Radio was the show that he did with Scotty.
Okay.
All
right.
But I think but anyway, I don't think it even exists anymore. But like we were both on the same thing, and I would go see if I wanted to see if my show was playing. And one day I go to the stream, and it's like these guys talking about like Whitley Strieber and UFOs and alien abductions and Bud Hopkins, and I was like instantly drawn in. And it was your 1980s episode of the UFO history shows. Yeah, and like so that's where I first heard. I'd heard Mike Clelland. I recognized his voice. I knew of him from the Gray Alien Report, but like Aaron, I never heard. I never heard of you, and I was like, I need to listen to a little more of this show. Like, this sounds really good, and so I did, and I started listening to it, and that's how eventually got to know you and really everybody else. I mean, just through that one time of me listening to a different show, like it's pretty much, I think, opened up a whole door, and it really kind of set me on that path to like strange realities and doing what I do now. So, like, it's crazy how like Jennifer Campbell, I'm sure she's listening. She used to call it the "Where Did the Road Go" verse, which includes you, of course, and my show, Conspiranormal, and Strange Familiars. So
yes, and
there is a certain network of people there, a certain constellation.
Yeah,
there is.
When the movie Something in the Dirt came out,
oh, that was so good.
Yes, I chose to buy it rather than rent it, and I'm watching it with my wife. And she just, like, every few minutes is like, that is you. That is effing you. That is you and your weird podcast buddies. That's who you are. Right there. Look at it. It was great. She enjoyed it, but
I've not seen this movie.
Nailed it.
Oh, it's fantastic. It's because the thing is, it shows you the subtlety of the paranormal, and it does it in a very realistic fashion that most movies on the paranormal do not do. And it's the same guys who did Resolution and Synchronic and
I've seen Synchronic.
Yeah. The first two they did that are connected, Resolution and I am not remembering the name of it, are incredible movies too. Synchronic was good. Spring was good as well. But Something in the Dirt, as far as like anyone who's into the paranormal or who has had paranormal experiences, you know exactly what the characters are going through. Which makes me wonder how much these guys are into the paranormal.
Right. I'll have to check that out.
Vibe in a way that you almost never see.
Yes. Yeah. And there has a very indie movie feel. Who are the director? Who are the writers on that? I cannot remember.
Two guys named Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead.
Yes.
And they've directed, I think, all five different movies.
Yep.
Yeah. The Endless is the one that I've seen. The Endless. That's the one that I saw.
Okay, so The Endless is the continuation, or at least not the continuation, but it is in the same universe as Resolution.
Yeah, I think the two guys in Resolution show up.
Yes,
in the
they
Endless.
do.
Yeah.
And they just have some great ideas they like to play around with. Spring was kind of Lovecraftian, but was probably my least favorite. And Something in the Dirt, like, yeah, that was a total surprise. I'm like, oh, cool, new Aaron Moorhouse movie. And I'm like, oh, this is dead on. Holy crap. But
well, I'll definitely have to check that out.
Very
sure.
neat, yes.
So, Aaron, you had mentioned a couple of things that you wanted to talk about earlier.
Aaron.
What was that?
Aaron?
For one guest short.
You said Aaron.
Did I say Aaron?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Adam.
It's late at night.
Where did Aaron come from? Maybe because you mentioned Aaron Gullius.
I mentioned Aaron Gullius.
And my brain just went.
Gullius could pop up any time. That'd be great, but he's not here now. So.
Yeah.
So, Adam, you mentioned that a couple of things that we could talk about here that you brought up.
Yeah, I've been one of the other projects that I do is Nevaeh's Nightmare. Nevaeh Terry, who's speaking or spoke at the conference, one of the two. We'll time travel a little bit here. I produce and I edit and I write some of the episodes for her. And one of the things that we just did just recently is about the Cottingley Fairy photos.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with that?
Oh, yeah.
Seriah?
Yeah, people thought those were real, and you look at them now, and you're like, really?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting. There's in going through doing the research for the video, I was really struck by the fact that the Theosophical Society was so widely involved with that.
Yeah.
They seem to have their hands in a lot of furthering that the whole fae folk and fairy idea and the revival of fairy folklore. I found out that Evans-Wentz, who wrote the huge book on fairy folklore.
Fairy faith in Celtic countries.
Right. Yeah. Evans-Wentz was a theosophist.
Oh, a lot of people were back then. I mean, they had a huge swath of influence. A huge thing. And which, by the way, when I was in Seattle with Sir Fiel, because that's where he lives now, I got to go to the Theosophical Society in Seattle, and that was fascinating. It reminded me very much of going to the House of the Temple, the Scottish Rite Freemasonry in Washington, D.C., in the respect that you had these huge libraries. And they actually had the same book, which was a, what's the Manly P. Hall, Secret Teaching of All Ages. Yeah.
So they had that huge, you can buy a huge edition, which is these beautiful plates that has all these different hermetic concepts. And, each chapter is one different hermetic concept in each one, and it's just this huge library. And which one of the things was fascinating was that there was a police chief in Seattle, I think in the sometime in the mid 20th century, but it was a woman police chief, and she was interested in theosophy, and she was interested in all kinds of really wouldn't typify as New Age then, but what I'm saying, it kind of leads up to that, and all these different ideas that she was into. And she had this huge library of esoteric books, and she actually left them to the Theosophical Society in Seattle. So a lot of their library is just based on that one person's donation. After she passed away, she donated them to the Theosophical Society. But they have a ton of books there about about psychical research and those type of things. And in fact, there was a lot of tie-in with spiritualism to theosophy. And Blavatsky she came from the spiritualist world, and then she started theosophy. So there's definitely some tie-in there. But the Cottingley Fairy photographs, I mean, it really was one of those hoaxes that was it was an obvious hoax. And even at the time, there were people that, were saying that, these girls they're doing something. They're getting these little cutouts, and that's what they're doing. But Arthur Conan Doyle, he didn't want to believe that.
Yeah.
And so, Conan Doyle, who was the author of the Sherlock Holmes books, of course, you've got the character in the Sherlock Holmes books that is, use as logic to deduct things. But meanwhile, Conan Doyle was also huge into spiritualism.
Yeah.
And
one of huge factor in spiritualism. Yeah.
Yes. One of his particular interest was spirit photography. And he felt that, this proved the existence of the afterlife. Because there was this idea in the late 19th and early 20th, even into the early 20th century, that photography could be taken at face value because there's no way to fake it, because it wasn't a popular. You had to go to a studio to go get a photograph done.
Right.
If you had means, you could have a camera like this girl's family did, but you didn't take it somewhere. You had to have a dark room. You had to develop the plates. So the technology was not as accessible, but there were people that understood the technology and they were able to manipulate it. But there was this idea that the camera doesn't lie.
Right.
They didn't
Picture's
understand.
worth 1,000 words. Yes.
Right. They didn't understand things like double exposure and what you could do with that. And what the girls were doing, the older girl, you had Frances, who was the younger girl. Elsie was the older girl. And Elsie, she was about 16 when it all started. Frances was 10. And Elsie took this, grab this real quick. She took some pictures from a children's book called Princess Mary's Gift Book. And she actually traced the pictures, or she copied them by hand. And then she added wings to the pictures and then took little hairpins and stuck them on the trees. And then she had Frances go and pose behind the pictures, right, behind the little quote unquote fairies that they put up there.
Mm-hmm.
And so they did this because Frances fell into a creek, and which the local people there called a beck. And so she falls into the beck and she gets wet and she goes back to her mother, and her mother is not happy that she's soaking wet. And she says, why did you fall in the creek? He says, well, Mom, I saw the fairies there. That's what she insisted that she said. And actually, to her dying day, Frances lived into her 80s. And she insisted that, she actually saw fairies. Well, she couldn't make her mother believe that. And so Elsie, the older girl, they were cousins. The older cousin comes to her and says, well, why don't we do this? So that's what they proceed to do. And if the adults actually believed them, they were going to fess up and say it was a hoax. Well, Mom and Dad actually didn't believe them. They thought it was a fake, that they were doing something. And there was another picture of Elsie is kneeled down, and there's this little gnome creature reaching up to her, and it looks, it's obviously fake.
Yes.
But
the thing is, if she actually saw something, she could have seen, lights or something like that caused her to fall into the creek,
there was a real paranormal experience that caused them to do this hoax, essentially, which was just a family hoax. It wasn't anything that was supposed to get as out of hand as it later did.
And I'm sorry, just to have some empathy, that if you have a paranormal experience and then everybody tells you, no, you didn't have anything, you just fell in the water, that would make you want to do something like that. It makes sense to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. To prove it. Right. Yeah. Especially for a child. Especially for a child.
Yes.
And then you've got this older cut. They're cousins. The other one's older than her, already a teenager. So I'm sure that, that she looks up to the older girl, and they hatch up this plan, and so it gets forgotten about. But then Elsie's mother goes to this lecture at the Theosophical Society, and the lecture is on fairy and fairy folklore. And Elsie's mother double thinks this and thinks maybe what my daughter took were actual pictures of fairies. So she takes it to the presenter, to the lecturer. That she takes the prints of the Theosophical Society. They eventually find their way to Edward Gardner, who is the head of the Theosophical Society in Britain, and this is right after World War I, okay, and this massive loss of life, and spiritualism has a resurgence during and after World War I because of the absolute just carnage, on the Western Front, and especially the British, like the Somme. I mean, what they lost like 20,000 men in like the first hour of the Battle of the Somme. I mean, that's just how brutal this war was. And so she takes it gets to Edward Gardner. And from Edward Gardner, he tells Arthur Conan Doyle.
Okay.
And Doyle gets interested in the case, and he actually supplies the girls a better camera. And the girls, of course, produce 3 more pictures, because they're like being forced to perform.
Yeah.
To prove that this is actually going on, is they've got all these important people that are basically staking their reputations on 2 teenage girls. And there were people, like I said, that at the time, said there was one picture where I think it's Elsie. She's sitting looking at a fairy, and the fairy is like holding something up to her. But you can very clearly see that the fairy has a very stylish 1920s bob haircut, So it's obviously something that's either she's cut from a magazine or she's copied from a magazine,
right? And
then added wings and made the little fairy. So there was a lot of ridicule at the time, and Houdini actually gets in on this. He had been the main arch nemesis of spiritualists, and actually him and Conan Doyle had this whole competition going on with each other. And he says, well, I know where this is from. This is from this catalog, and this is where the girls pulled this out from. And it turns out it's not from the catalog. It's from a totally different source. But Conan Doyle uses that to say, well, we can't disprove it, so therefore these fairy pictures must be true. He writes an article in a magazine called The Strand in 1920. He publishes a book about it in 1922.
Wow.
The girls, they grow up, they get married, they grow up, have children of their own, and it's not until they're very old women in their 70s, and even until 1976, Elsie is on camera for the BBC saying that, yeah, this was real, we did this. And the thought that the reason they didn't fess up until 1983 was that there had been so many people that had staked their reputation on these fairy photos being real, and also their descendants, that if you fessed up to it, it would ruin a lot of reputations. So the thought is they waited till a lot of these people were dead or it had been forgotten about to finally say, yeah, this was not real. We made this. But again, there may be, on Francis's part, there may have been a real experience involved.
Right.
And that's a fascinating aspect to the case.
If I may,
yeah.
weren't Conan Doyle and Houdini good friends, and this broke them apart?
I'm not sure if the Cottingley itself did, but I think that's
Houdini
a good question. I'm not sure.
Houdini debunking fake spiritualists.
Yeah.
I think that kind of drove them apart.
It did. It definitely did.
If you give me 1 second here, in full disclosure, there were different kinds of spiritualists. There were a ton of frauds.
Sure.
Absolutely, 100%. At the same time, there were a lot of sincere people who practiced spiritualism as a real religion or spiritual path.
Mm-hmm.
And I have had the good fortune to interview one of the board members of the head of the National Spiritualist Association of Churches.
Oh.
The Reverend Stacy Schulman. And she lives now I'm blanking on the name, but it's the place in upstate New York where everything started.
Yeah, with the sisters.
Lilydale.
Yeah.
Lilydale, exactly. She lives in Lilydale. And her statement was, we don't hate Houdini. Houdini kept us honest. He rooted out the frauds. Because yes, there were a bunch of frauds, but everybody wasn't a fraud. And, there were some people who treated that as a real spiritual path. And full disclosure, the only church I've ever attended that wasn't a wedding or a funeral in the last 30 years is the spiritualist church in an adjoining suburb of Milwaukee. And yes, I'm not officially a member, but that's as close to a spiritual path as I have. It's really inspiring, and I really appreciate those people. I'm just throwing that in there. Okay. There were 100%. There are many frauds. There are many frauds today.
Sure.
But there are also people for whom spiritualism is a real religion and a real spiritual.
Oh, right.
So
right. I mean,
just saying.
Sweet. Well, I mean, I think also you got to add Swedenborgianism in there, which you could include as a real religion. as a real religious practice, at least. And that's that in some ways, that in some ways contributes greatly to spiritualism, because Swedenborgianism, of course, it starts in Sweden with Swedenborg, but it really becomes a thing here, and especially in upstate New York. Like, Seriah, you got a lot of weird stuff going on up there, man.
Yes.
I don't know.
Oh, you're in the zone, man. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Burned over district.
Upstate New York was the whole area was, full around probably the early part of the 19th century was just full of religious movements. I mean, Mormonism starts up there, spiritualism starts up there. It just for some reason, it's very much like the California of its time for new religious movements.
And then as you go
over district,
you go forward, and you got stuff like Jane Roberts, and then even Whitley Strieber. His experiences where it's Canada and upstate New York.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh man, I hadn't thought of those. Yes. Strange neck of the woods.
I mean, I remember my neighbor who knew nothing about who I was or the stuff I did randomly saying to me, "See UFOs over the lake sometimes." And I was like,
Hudson River Valley is, huge with UFO
right,
sightings.
But
that's one of the big hot spots.
It is, and so is Cayuga Lake, which has a fault line running under it, and that's what she was talking about. And just randomly spits that out, and I'm like, "Yep,"
Do tell.
kind of not sure where that came from, but okay.
Steven Steiner, I was on the farm not that long ago, and Steven brought up a good point that some of the spiritualists, some of the mediums especially, it was like a cover for prostitution.
Really?
That was a mind-blowing episode with Stephen. Yeah. He revealed some things that I did not see coming at all. Yeah. That was wild as hell, man. That's a good one to listen to.
So it's not as much that they were frauds as if they were just a cover.
Yeah. There was a lot of weird stuff going on like that. That it was like, you're with a woman in the dark type of thing. And that there could have been some of that involved. And in any time I think that you're going to have a kind of like fringe movement like that, it's going to attract probably really fringe, and probably some criminal elements too. So that's not surprising.
And then you get some ectoplasm coming out of somewhere. Anyway.
Exactly.
Huh. When you look at like the Fox sisters, I suspect when that stuff started with them, like most poltergeist cases, it was probably real. Because I think the one sister never admitted to being fake, and the other one did, but then she took it back or something, if I'm remembering right.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, there was
all through a lot too. They were the focus of a lot of tabloid coverage. And they, became famous really young. And the tabloids were even more ruthless than they are today. And one, they'd been through a lot of stuff, and one developed a real drinking problem. And, it was a tough time for them. Absolutely.
They got accused of hoaxing too. I mean, with the rapping, and they said that the knocking was them actually like popping their feet bones and like all these type of stuff. And like, I mean, who really knows? I mean, the relationship between hoaxing and actual paranormal activity is pretty interesting. Josh talking about that. He's going to talk about that at the conference. But like, it's interesting. I mean, just like in the famous poltergeist case in England in the 70s.
Enfield, right?
Enfield. Yeah.
Enfield's a very good case.
That is so well documented.
Yeah.
But, and so many just like anomalous and weird stuff. Like, how did like the little girl come up with that voice? It sounded like this old ass man. And like,
while she had water in her mouth.
Right. It's crazy. I mean, but the guy Lion Playfair and Morris, I don't remember his last name, but they both did such a good job of just documenting that case to where it's so watertight. But even in the Enfield case, the girls had this pressure to perform, and they would hoax things. But that would also cause paranormal activity to pop off.
as soon as they started hoaxing things, they got caught.
Yeah.
Like they weren't good at hoaxing things. That's the thing. The activity died down, as it often does, and they were like, oh, well, we're not going to get any attention if there's no activity.
Yeah.
Seriah, the Warrens showed up and solved everything. I saw the movie. Okay?
Yeah, that's right.
That's what I'm talking about.
The nature of all this paranormal stuff, the one thing that I've noticed, and definitely from doing a paranormal themed podcast, is there is that pressure to perform for people, and that's when people, I think, start getting into trouble of being accused of hoaxing things. Like, what's his name? Stan Romanek, who, of course, pretty questionable guy, but he may have had an actual paranormal experience, but to prove it, much like the girls in Cottingley did, to prove it, they hoaxed something. So it just it becomes kind of this circle of the hoax causes paranormal activity, and then you have to hoax again, and it causes, it's like Alan Greenfield said on my show one time. He said that there's really no such things as hoaxes, but that's coming from that whole like Gray Barker and Jim Mosley school of thought, where they call in a fake UFO sighting to some town in West Virginia, and then all of a sudden people started hearing UFOs, seeing UFOs. Right. So like there's definitely an odd psychological effect too.
If it's just psychological, and if we're not, I don't think we understand the way we affect reality. I don't think we have a clue about the way we affect reality.
Yeah, you're right.
I was listening to and another very marginal figure with Whitley Strieber, because sometimes he kind of like jumps on things that look like obvious hoaxes. Like I think he even said he saw one of the what were they? The drones. Remember the drones?
Yes, I do.
They looked like insects, and they would like disappear and reappear and stuff. And I think Strieber even said he saw one of those, and they were fairly well debunked as not having happened. That they were all video editing and stuff like that. It doesn't mean he didn't see one, but that's because that's just the thing, Who was the person who saw the UFO that looked just like the one Adamski made? Oh, I can't remember.
Are you talking about Benicio del Toro?
No. Though I don't think so.
Because he saw a really crappy looking UFO.
Yeah, well, there was someone who literally saw the UFO that Adamski made, and they knew that's what it was. They're like, "This isn't real. I'm looking at the thing Adamski took a picture of that was fake." So, I mean, it's hard to know where that line is. And I was listening to Strieber talk to Jeff Ritzman on one of the more recent Paratopias that Jeremy put out. And one of the things that struck me is they're talking about these things being able to be invisible. And with how our perception works, like, because Strieber was speculating, I mean, this is like 2012. Strieber's speculating that they have a technology that allows them to be invisible, which is certainly a possibility that whatever this stuff is, has tech that can allow them to do that, but it might just be that they know how to manipulate our senses so that we don't see them anymore. It may not require necessarily a technology as much as a sort of spiritual knowledge of like how easy it is to fool the human brain.
I've got to confess, Seriah, I could watch the basketball game 100 times. I'll never see the gorilla. I'm just counting the passes. That's what I'm doing. I'm looking for gorillas, so I don't see gorillas. You know what I'm talking about.
Yes, the invisible gorilla, yes.
I would fail that every single time.
But that's the thing. That's how easy it is for our perceptions to be manipulated. So if these things are masters of manipulating what we perceive, they may not need technology to be invisible. And it also makes me wonder about like the Glimmer Man thing. Like, okay, so we have a decent amount of evidence that the Glimmer Man thing is technology, but we don't know exactly when that technology existed. And we have, Glimmer Man cases from, I'm trying to remember what the earlier ones were, like maybe the 1990s or whatever. And they're always described as looking like the Predator. Well, what if the Predator movies didn't exist? Would they still be described the same way? Like, did that, if there's a legitimate paranormal Glimmer Man that's not our tech, could that thing be looking the way it does because of the popularity of the Predator movies? Like, how much does our culture influence the way the paranormal presents itself to us?
I think you make a really valid point. If you had an alien, I don't mean like from another planet, but just not us, and you had to talk to humans, you'd want to talk in terms that you've gleaned from them that they can understand this. so we shall appear as this. And that they may not get. Like, it's not good when you show up looking like a red devil with horns and a tail, but at least they understand that's a concept they have, so we'll appear as that.
Right.
And, they're just trying to communicate. But when you're communicating with something completely different than you, that's a hard thing to do.
But also how much of it is intentional? Like, how much of it is our brain putting an image there, filling in a blank, which might be why different cultures see this stuff so differently, interpret it so differently. Like, the number of gray experiences went way up after Missing Time and Communion came out. And it's almost like it gave them that paradigm. Obviously skeptics will say, well, that's because people are lying and they're just using that as the image. But I suspect it's because it only happened in countries where those books were published. So I suspect that it somehow takes our cultural contamination, like, just fills in the blanks on these things.
That makes a lot of sense. Also, your mind, and you've mentioned this, your mind will only let you see as much as you can handle.
Well, yeah.
And in the one and only sighting that I've ever had of any significance, my wife and I both saw it, but she saw a Bigfoot.
Right.
And I saw a weird mutant bear. Because I don't necessarily know that I could have handled seeing the full-on Bigfoot. You know what I mean?
Right.
Your brain will protect you from seeing too much, you know what I mean, that you can't necessarily deal with, And, for what it's worth, I think that is a real thing. I think that people often block out things that they would find too scary, too terrifying. I think that happens. I think it's happened to me.
Was a weird mutant bear better?
Compared to a full-on Bigfoot, maybe so. Again, it was running away from us, so it wasn't scary, but my brain had only able to process so much. But we both saw something huge doing the same movements and looking pretty close to the same. And thank God she was there, because otherwise I thought I'd just losing my mind. But, that did happen. It only lasted a few seconds.
Right.
But it was a big deal. And that's happened exactly once in my life, But I think there is a lot of filtering, as you point out.
Well, here's the other interesting thing. So, as you just described, that type of thing is not uncommon when people have paranormal experiences. Sometimes some people will see something, some people won't see anything at all in the same experience, or they'll describe it completely differently. But years ago, when the Google blimp that no one knew existed got loose somewhere down your way, Adam, people were calling in UFO reports because they were seeing this weird-looking thing flying overhead. All the UFO reports were dead-on accurate describing this thing. There was no variance in these reports, which means that A, when people see stuff, they're generally reporting it pretty accurately, and B, it turned out to be the Google blimp, so it was a physical, real object. It was nothing paranormal, versus paranormal reports where they vary a lot, which it seems counterintuitive, but maybe that variance shows us what's paranormal versus what's not.
I think that makes a lot of sense. There is the phenomena, whatever it may be, but that's very different from just a physical object running amok, that makes a lot of sense.
Any thoughts, Adam?
Well, I would agree. I would agree with that. I think that there's definitely the way your mind works is just an amazing thing, intricate. Even if you don't have the paranormal aspect involved, there's just so many things. Like the whole adage of your mind playing tricks on you.
Oh yeah.
Well, what is really going on there? And it's just like your whole thing about the gorilla is interesting because I think it's just a perception, and maybe some people, what people miss in the background, they may not see in the foreground. I think it also can depend on the person too.
Sure, absolutely.
The way an individual's mind can work. And so if Vincent sees a weird looking bear and his wife sees a Bigfoot, are they really seeing, is one seeing the correct thing, or is neither of them seeing the correct thing? So
seeing something, but
you're seeing something.
Exactly. Right. I make no even speculations on what the hell happened there. Exactly. I'll say this: it was not a natural animal. Now, right. I do believe during the few seconds that we saw it, which was enough time to look right at it. It wasn't peripheral. I'm looking right at this thing for a few seconds. at that moment, it was totally physical. It was struggling to get up a steep hill. It was 100% physical at that moment. But I don't believe that if we could have pulled over and like gone and followed it, I don't think we would have found like a cave it lives in or something like that. No, the area isn't that rural. There's no undiscovered animal in that place. It's just not. There have been farmers there for a couple hundred years. It's not an undiscovered creature.
Right.
But at that second, it was physical. And then it was gone. That's what I would say.
And then it deteriorates for lack of energy.
Yes, absolutely.
And leaves it behind a sulfury smell.
Right, exactly. All right, let's take a quick...
We didn't have to get the smell, eh?
Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back. Quick mid-show break here. Contact info and a recommendation. Contact info is pretty simple. WhereDidTheRoadGo.com. You can find everything you want there. And you can find every show back to the very first one. They will all be up in, hopefully, on Acast soon. It's going to take a little time to do it. I'm going to do them all at once, so you'll get a massive flood of old shows. But this will make everything available on the RSS feed as opposed to you having to go to the website for old shows. Of course, becoming a patron helps a lot. If you want to become a patron, it's only $3 a month, and you get extra content with almost every show, plus extra stuff, including full sets of all the shows and Patreon segments at the end of the year for the previous year. So a lot of cool stuff gets put up there, and man, my patrons are awesome. So there's a lot of good conversations there. Also, of course, rating and reviewing the show positively wherever you're listening to it is always helpful as well. And if you like heavy music, check out my music show, The Last Exit for the Lost. You're going to hear stuff there you're not going to hear anywhere else. Some of it's not even available anywhere else. So if you want to, a new listening experience, check out thelastexit.org. Most of the shows are archived from the last few years, and there's archived shows all the way back to like 1996 on the site. All right. Recommendation. There is a podcast called Undertow. Now, it's a Realm podcast, but it's an anthology type of thing. So they will put new stories up, and then those stories end, and so it's like 10 episodes or whatever. And some of them are good, some of them I don't care about. I'm currently in the middle of listening to Blood Forest, which I think I wasn't going to listen to because it's about werewolves, and I don't generally care about werewolves, but that one's actually pretty good. But the current one that's running is called Hovering. It's not quite done, but it's about a little sleepy town that has a UFO sighting. And it's really, really good at kind of looking at how people respond, the ridicule factor, everything. Like, they do it really, really well. Whoever wrote this story realizes that this is a very complex thing that is not... it's not just cut and dry, and the characters describe what they see similarly, but take away from it very different things. And it's not a massively supernatural show, at least not so far. I don't know how many episodes I've gone through at this point, but there's just the UFO sighting. So people see this UFO, they all react to it differently. The authorities react to it differently. The reaction of the other people to the people who saw it is very interesting. It's just very well done. There's short episodes, they're like maybe 20 minutes a piece, I think. But yeah, that would be my recommendation. Some of the other stuff they've done has also been good. I don't think I've listened to most of it. I've listened to some of it. Yeah. So Undertow on the Realm Podcast Network. That's my recommendation. Now back to the show. So I'm here with Vincent Treewell and Adam Sayne, and Adam's going to tell us about a vampire.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you about a vampire. So we're going to talk about the Highgate vampire. Okay. Have you ever heard of this, Seriah?
It rings a vague bell, but I don't think I know anything about it.
I heard one podcast once, and it's a fascinating story. Go ahead.
I first heard of this story from a show called Where Did the Road Go? Not Where Did the Road Go? Oh my God. World of the Unexplained.
I was going to say, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Because the other one's kind of just some
you can
niche
edit that.
market thing.
So I first heard of this from a show called World of the Unexplained, and this was one of my favorite podcasts. So it was really like an internet radio show. Really, is what you could call it back in the day. And I would listen to this thing like religiously. And it's really one of the first things that really got me into like wanting to do my own show. And the host on there, Jay Scott, he had on both the guys involved with this. So, Bishop Sean Manchester and David Farrant. Those are the two guys that are involved with this like whole thing called the Highgate Vampire. And these two guys did not like each other, so he didn't have them on at the same time. He had one on one night and then the other to give their side of the story the other night.
Wow.
And so really basically what happens with the Highgate Vampire is Highgate Cemetery in London. So we're back in the UK again. And Highgate Cemetery is like this really famous cemetery. Like Karl Marx is buried there. There's all these like poets and philosophers and stuff. And by the late 1960s, it had kind of fallen into like kind of disuse and disrepair. So it was like this weird, creepy place that like kids would go to and, mess around and do like weird mock satanic rituals and stuff like this. And so there was this kind of like satanic panic aspect to it, even though this is like kind of predates the satanic panic a little bit. But it's really something that's really comes out of, it seems like it comes out like a Hammer horror film from the 1960s or 1970s. And in fact, there was a Hammer horror film that was based on the Highgate case that came out called Dracula 1972. Okay. So it was like art inspired life and then re-inspired art again. So there's this weird circle there, but
kind of a cult classic, right?
Yeah. It's like a feedback loop. I'm fascinated by those. I'm fascinated by the feedback loop of this phenomenon. And so basically, people started seeing weird things in this cemetery. There was lights being seen. There were all these like shadowy figures being seen. Somebody would be walking their dog through the cemetery in the middle of the night and get spooked by something. And this kept going on. And these two guys, one was Bishop Sean Manchester, who is like an absolute character. He's like, he's got the big curly hair. And he always wore like, some priest outfit and had the big crucifix. So he looks like Van Helsing, And he came from like some like traditionalist Catholic background, like some breakaway Catholic church.
Would it be fair to call him a wandering bishop?
Maybe. You might be able to call him that.
But he's like Catholic, but not Roman Catholic. He's not official.
Right. Like probably one of these people that didn't, recognize Vatican II, And so he comes up with, he said, what he states is that there was this girl that was being attacked by a vampire that was coming from the Highgate Cemetery, and that she would go sleepwalking into the cemetery at night. So this stuff is like straight out of Dracula. Okay. And, he says that one night he follows her into the cemetery, and then she faints, and they have to carry her back home, and they notice these little bite marks on her neck. And so this goes on for a while, and finally he figures out, well, there's a vampire in the cemetery. It's going around, it's attacking people, it's scaring people. There's this weird stuff going on with like dead foxes are being found all over the cemetery around the same time. This is roughly about 1969, 1970 that this is going on. And at one point, Bishop Sean Manchester claims that he goes to Highgate, and he claims that he goes to this mausoleum, and he takes care of the Highgate vampire by finding the grave, sticking it in the heart, and, taking care of it. So like typical vampire story, he saves the day. Well, there's this other guy named David Farrant, and Farrant is head of this like psychic research society, basically in his own self-styled psychic research society. He disagrees with Bishop Sean Manchester, and he says that, what's going on is that, it's not a real vampire. This is paranormal in nature. This is a ghost that is attacking people and scaring people, and we're going to prove it. So Sean Manchester does not like this very much, and these two guys get in like this really big like paranormal beef battle with each other, which the media...
Just butt in for a second. Is Manchester saying that literally there's a walking corpse that gets out of its grave and goes and
a real vampire.
People?
Yes,
absolutely. A physical vampire. Okay.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
And
cool.
That is his claim. David Ferret disagrees with this, says that this is a ghost, says that this is more paranormal. Well, I guess it's all paranormal in nature, but more down to the earth paranormal. Okay, this is not a non-corporeal being. And so he's setting up in there too, and he's doing his little research and stuff. And while this is going on, the media is getting a lot of media attention. And the media the tabloid media in Britain is like just out of control. I mean, in fact, it's like still out of control. But they really glum on to Bishop Sean Manchester and David Ferret, and they glum onto these two guys and their personalities. And, they decide on March 13th, 1970, which is Friday the 13th, because how could they resist? They have on both of these guys on this TV show, I think on ITV or Tim's Television, one of the other, besides BBC, television stations in Britain. And so they go on and they make these claims, and this is the first time that it's really on TV and not on the like just like tabloid print media. Well, people go nuts. People go to the Highgate Cemetery. They demand that action be taken about what is going on with these foxes being killed, what the satanic rituals are about, what's going on with the vampire, what are these guys talking about? And they go and they basically just like start tearing up the fence, the gate, the fence at the cemetery. The police have to be called. They have to. It's a riot. So it starts a riot at the cemetery. These two guys going on TV, and so eventually this dies down.
Anytime you say riot at the cemetery, you got a story there. Go ahead.
There's definitely a story there. In fact, I've got a picture. It's a picture of the riot as it's going on, and of course, that furthers it even more. Like the tabloid media just eats this up. I mean, just eats it up. And at one point, there's even talk of basically like Manchester and Ferret getting together and having what's basically going to be a wizard battle where they're going to battle each other. It's like the battle between good and evil, the good wizard and the bad wizard over what's going on at Highgate Cemetery. But it ends up getting canceled because for some reason people that think that cats are going to be sacrificed. So the RSPCA has to intervene for the cats.
The one thing you never do is screw cats. Okay, trust me on that. Look at it on Netflix. Don't F with cats. Sound about right?
And Manchester shows up, but Ferret doesn't. So that gets canceled.
Well, no, he wins by default.
What's that?
He wins by default because the other guy didn't show up.
He wins by default. He wins the wizard battle by default. And so what ends up happening eventually is that like other things keep going on. There's at one point this guy comes out to his car in the morning and there's a dead body minus a head sitting in the car.
Oh, jeez.
It's figured out that this was not a fresh murder. This was someone had dug up this body and put it in the car. And so there's some grave robbing aspects of this too.
It certainly makes it weirder, but good Lord.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, and Ferret is also accused of actually arrested at one point because he's always in the cemetery doing his investigations, and the police put him on the radar and they actually arrest him for some of this, but they don't have any proof. So they don't, they can't hold him. But like what gets bogged down in this is that it gets focused on this like really ridiculous competition between Sean Manchester and David Ferret. They become the personalities involved in this case, and whatever real was actually happening and whatever real experiences people were seeing was being overlooked. That was just
If I may just butt in for 2 seconds. Yeah. Oh my God, I can't imagine being the lawyer who has to defend the guy who was found in the cemetery.
Right.
He was in the cemetery, but he wasn't doing anything, okay? You have no proof. We asked for dismissal. He was never doing anything, but he was in the cemetery. That's a tough case right off the bat. I just let it go at that.
True. And but also I think that there may be more to the story. I mean, it's possible that like you could have a tulpa effect involved where people would begin to see a figure because of just the hysteria,
right?
The mass hysteria aspect of this. I think that's definitely a possibility.
You even need a tulpa for that, though?
Well, not really. No, but people were seeing something. So
yeah. Or thought they were in the dark. Sometimes it's hard to say.
But I think there's definitely a mass hysteria thing, and then you add in these two jokers, Farron and Manchester, and these guys they quibbled over this thing for decades. Wow. I think Farron dies in like 2017 or 2018. Manchester supposedly is still alive, and he still makes he'll still do interviews. Seriah, so you should have him on to talk about the Highgate vampire.
Now, which one is he? Is he the one that killed the vampire, or the
He's the one that killed the vampire.
Okay.
Yes.
Which means he opened somebody's grave potentially and stuck a stake through them.
So he says. Like, whether this was actually done or not is a different case.
Physically pounded a stake through a corpse, like a piece of metal through a corpse's heart with a hammer.
I think it gets really involved. I think at some point, like, it's straight out of a horror. Everything he says is straight out of a Hammer horror film. I remember. You can find, I think, World of the Unexplained's interview with him, and it's pretty entertaining. Let's just put it that way.
That's the
Highgate vampire.
I've probably heard that case before, but I didn't remember any of those details. The wizard battle sounds awesome.
If it had happened.
Yeah.
But they thought cats were going to be involved, so the RSPCA had
would they be throwing the cats at each other using wizard powers?
I think they thought they were just going to be sacrificed.
Wow. Okay, so I have a hard question for both of you, since especially for Adam, since she's closing in on 500 episodes. But of your respective podcasts, Conspiranormal and The Weird Part with Vincent Treewell, what would be some of your favorite shows?
I'm going to let Vincent go first on that one. I need to think about that.
Well, thanks, man. Appreciate it. You only got 500 episodes. I got like 89.
Right, so it should be easier for you.
I got 500 episodes. I have to think about it.
Or no, I can tell you. I'll give you two answers. If you're asking what is going to be most satisfying to the listeners, probably the last one I did with Robert Guffey.
Right.
Because he's just a great guest. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But the one that means the most to me was the one I did with Esoterics. He was a blogger, and I followed his blog for like 5 years. And then I was dawning on, who should I have as a podcast guest? Hey, why not this guy who you've been seeing blog for 5 years? And I reached out to him, and he immediately picked up on that. And we had a great conversation. And we talked about, this is going to sound niche, but it's not. It's good. We talked about, I'm a lawyer. He also has experience in that. And he talked about lawsuits against non-human entities. Okay. And a lot of this was kind of medieval.
Right.
Where people sued, they sued the bugs for eating the crops.
Okay.
And it was a great episode. And 2 weeks, a week or two later, I contacted him and said, hey, man, that went really well. Let's do this again. 2 days later, got an email from his wife that he had died.
Oh, jeez.
Suddenly, at a ridiculously young age, 52. You know what I mean? He'd had a heart attack and died at a really young age. And that was the only time I ever had to talk to him. And it was a great episode. Standalone. Forget the circumstances. It was a great episode.
Yeah.
The fact could never be repeated.
Yeah.
Made that kind of the one for me. Esoteric. And I would tell everybody to Google. The blog is still up there. ESOTERIX. esoterics, great guy, had a fantastic blog. Did it when he felt like it. It wasn't, consistently every week.
I think I followed his blog, actually.
Yeah. I mean, he's very interesting. He picked up on some crazy stuff. And man, I was able to talk with him for like 2 hours, and I couldn't wait to do it again. And then he was dead. And that happened. And, that will always be the special one to me because it was really good on its own. But
and probably the last interview he did.
Yes. Oh, I think 1,000% that is the last thing he said online, period.
Wow.
And that blew me away. And he was extremely talented, very intelligent guy, and just picked up on all the weirdest stuff. He was so great. And it's been good that his wife has promoted my interview with him.
Oh, nice.
Because, she's been very accepting of that, and I really appreciate that. I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. But yeah, that'd probably be my number one episode.
All right. What about you, Adam?
Oh, there's so much.
I know.
There really is. It's really hard to choose. We've talked about so much great stuff.
Well, it doesn't have to be the absolute best. Which ones stand out to you the most?
Well, I'll tell you. I'll answer the question this way. Anything that I've done with Dr. Future has always been great. The shows that he's been on, Walter Bosley, some of those episodes. I think one of my favorites of all time was the first time we ever had Walter on when we talked about the Empire of the Wheel. Sondra London last year was a great episode. I got a lot of flack for that episode, but I thought that was a really,
I don't know who that is.
Really great one. So Sondra London.
Awesome. I'm sorry I butted in, but go ahead.
Oh, well, go ahead. You can tell who she is.
Sondra London is a true crime author. She produced the only book I've ever thrown away because I felt it was too evil. Okay. That's not a criticism. She's a great journalist, and she's a real life journalist and a wonderful author. She happened in high school to date a guy that later became a serial killer. And she put out a book where she visited him in prison and talked with him. And it's disturbing. Okay. It's hard to read. Okay. But she also interviewed other serial killers. And she's a real life journalist, and she does a fantastic job covering some very controversial content. And I mean, she's awesome, and it's very unique to what it is, but yeah, she's great. And I actually got a chance to meet her in person last year, and it was wonderful. And she just does her thing, but she is a really good journalist, and she's willing to meet serial killers where they are. And that comes off wrong. But if you want to know what these people's story is, you don't do tabloid journalism. You go and talk to them. And she's willing to do that. And very few journalists are willing to do that and really, really get to know them. And you get some absolutely fascinating content. And I mean, she's great. And yeah.
So why did you get heat for it, Adam?
Because she's so controversial.
What is controversial about her?
Well, because so back in the 90s, she was involved with the Gainesville Strangler. Okay, this guy that killed all these girls in the dorm room in the late 1980s. And she apparently, she got close to him, and apparently, she was accused of being one of these women that is like a murder groupie, basically. But she was doing her journalism work, and it's possible that she may really have gotten involved with him too. But so that was really one of the things that she got a lot of flack for. Okay. And the book that we interviewed her about was this thing called Good Little Soldiers, which was about these claims that these people had that she worked with on this book with, about being abused by their serial killer / MK Ultra assassin father, so it was all kinds of just, it was nuts. And it was it was a hard book to get through and read, but it was more for me, how much of this is true and how much of this is just fantasy. I don't doubt that there could have been some abuse involved, but whether it was an actual MK Ultra program, I don't know.
Gotcha.
So we got flack for that, for not like challenging that. Like we're
Right.
supposed to challenge everybody we have on. But, we got some flack over it. But, hey, there's no such thing as bad publicity.
If I can put it, you can't invite somebody to be a guest and tell them, by the way, you're totally full of crap.
Right. That's what people want you to do. Yeah, that's what people want you to do sometime. But kind of moving on to there was one we did around the same time, Gary Revell, which was a great episode where he had actually been an investigator on the Martin Luther King case. And some of the things that he found out, that was like kind of like firsthand knowledge of some of that stuff, which I thought was really valuable. One of the things that I have found value about doing my show, and I think you would agree with me on this, Seriah, is that since we've been doing this so long, Vincent now too. There's so many of our guests that have passed on.
Yes.
And so we've kind of gotten to the point where
but yeah, that happens. Yeah. That is a lot.
Right. We've preserved their voices. Timothy Beckley, was one of them. I mean, I got to talk to him twice. And it was like a real privilege to speak to him, and because there's a whole generation of a lot of those researchers, old school researchers, that are really just passing away. And even though I don't agree with the methods or things, it was still good to talk to somebody like David Jacobs. That was kind of a little earlier on for me.
Well, he hasn't passed away though.
No, he's not passed away. But I'm just using him as an example of just it's still great to talk to these people. I mean, Peter, too, has been a great to talk to, and his just absolute wealth of knowledge and,
life experience
that man has is incredible, with so many different aspects of things that I'm interested in. And, I hope Peter's with us for a long, long time.
Yeah. I hope he matches his dad.
Yeah. I hope. Yeah. His dad lived way into his 90s.
Yep. 96 or 97.
Yeah. So, to me, I think that's some of the most important work that we've done. And I'm sure that there is probably an episode that I'm just totally blanking on that was absolutely amazing. But I can't really think about it. I think it's just more the sum and total of just the people that you get to talk to is really the answer to that question, especially if have almost 500 episodes.
I mean, I've made so many good friends like you guys doing this show. Joshua Cutchin, Timothy Renner, Christopher Ernst, and Saxon, and man, I could actually make this a very long list. So I mean, to me, that's always great.
Social media, right? Where you make friends in real life,
Yeah, exactly. And there were people the first time I heard Josh on Micah's show, I was like, I need to talk to this guy. I'm going to get along really well with this guy, and he's really on to something. And turns out I was right. We got along really well, and he was on to something. Mike Clellan, same thing. I heard Mike, and I'm like, I need to talk to this guy. That was also Micah. I mean, Micah helped me out a lot in the beginning. And then there's Jeff Ritzman, who every time I listen to Paratopia, it hurts a little that I can't talk to them about the stuff they're talking about on these, 12-year-old, 13-year-old shows. I could have Jeremy on to kind of cover it, but it's not Jeff.
Right.
And I I happened to look up when I just put up. We're recording. We're recording this right after I put up the Jeremy Vaney interview publicly, and I wanted to make sure I had Jeff Ritzman's last name right because I couldn't remember if it was one or two M's. Or one or two N's at the end. And it's two. And when I Googled it real quick, there was a woman who wrote a blog post who, I can't remember I think she was connected to the Lodge 49 show that he was really obsessed with. And it was just this really heartfelt thing. And she ended it saying something like, I can't believe I feel this much emotion about losing someone I never met in real life. And that's kind of how I felt with Jeff, because I never got to meet him in real life. And it's it doesn't feel that way.
In today's world, it doesn't really matter. That's exactly how I feel about esoterics,
Yeah.
You can have a real relationship with people. Well, like Seriah, we've never met in person.
Nope.
But we've been in contact for years.
Yeah, true.
And I don't drive the freeway, and one of these damn days I'm going to make it out to upstate New York. But I haven't. And it's like that. In this world, we don't need to shake hands physically to have a relationship. And I'm not going to pull back. I love you, man. And also you, Adam. I
love you too, Vincent.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We're all going to start sounding like Ozzy. We better be careful. I love you all.
I canceled my video because I was wearing a AC/DC t-shirt, and I didn't know if you could give me some of that. But anyway, never mind. We have a real relationship. We just haven't met in person.
Yeah.
It's going to happen, but we still have a relationship. It's 1,000% real. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, oh, totally. And then
absolutely. And that's the world we live in now. So yeah, I get it. And 100%.
when I went to this last Alba Twitch, I remember that Adam was actually here for the first one I went to.
Yep, I sure was.
And we wiped you out.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, well, because he had been doing stuff with Peter, and then I don't remember how we coordinated that, if you came here or whatever, and then we drove the 5 hours down to Columbia at 9 in the morning or something, and then
so I had just driven from Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
I got there the day before. I got there Friday. I spent the night with Peter over there at his place, and then I met up with you in the morning. So it's 30 minutes from where Peter lives to where you live.
Right.
So I got there in the morning, and then we drove back down to southern Pennsylvania.
Almost to exactly where you came from.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we drove back up, recorded a live Where Did the Road Go in studio.
Yes.
Where
I couldn't find where to go.
Where to park. Yeah, we start the show, and I'm like, just go up here and turn right into the parking lot and park there. And you turned right onto the little road that looks like it's a parking lot entrance. And I'm like, and you're calling me going, I don't know where I am. And I'm like, cool. I have to be live on the air. I'm just going to send my sound guy out to find you. So I give Nathan my phone, and he goes out looking for you. And then I don't have either of you, and Nathan has my phone.
Right.
But you did make it.
I remember that.
And then you made about an hour or so of last exit before you were like, nope, I'm done. I need sleep.
Yeah.
Because we had a band playing that night as well. We had Apothecary playing, who were a national act who were coming through.
Yeah, I did see them play. Yes.
Yep, and they were cool people too, which is always a plus. Just like you guys.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Even if Vincent's wearing an AC/DC shirt.
I have an AC/DC t-shirt, and I didn't want you to give me a bunch of crap.
All right. Well, this seems like a good place to stop. So thank you both. Tell people where they can find you. Vincent?
YouTube channel and podcast. Podcast is available wherever you find podcasts. YouTube channel, just put Vincent Treewell in, just like it sounds, in quotation marks. You'll get there. Yes.
And what's the name of the podcast?
The Weird Part with Vincent Treewell.
And Adam? Did you have something else, Vincent?
No, that's cool.
Okay.
Also, I have a novel called Cosmic Collision.
Oh, that's right.
It's available on Amazon. I push you. It's a cult classic, you might say. People either really like it or they really don't. The ones that really like it want me to sign a copy, so nice. I'll give you a signed copy. It's no problems. I've said enough, but yes.
And Adam?
Treewell, with that in quotation marks, you'll find everything I've got.
Okay.
Including my recaps of Seriah.
That is true.
Is my privilege to do basically every week. I try. But it's awesome.
All right, Adam?
You can find me at Conspiranormal. And Conspiranormal podcast. You can find it anywhere podcasts are available. And we're on Spotify, Apple, all that good stuff. Also, that's the main place, Conspiranormal podcast on YouTube. And if this is out before, then, Strange Realities Conference is coming up November 1st to the 2nd. So that's there as well.
So what happens if someone missed it? Can they still sign up after the fact and go back and watch the videos?
Yeah, well, hit me up and we'll get you in.
All right. Thank you both.
We usually do have people after the conference. Hit me up, and there's like, a few people that are stragglers.
Right, so. Right. All right. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, man. This has been a great day.
I want to take a moment here to thank all of my Patreons. I can't do this without you, so thank you for supporting the show. And know that every positive thing that comes out of this show is partially because of you. And I want to give a special shout out to all of those patrons I want to give a special shout out to all my patrons who are pledging $10 or more a month. Greg Ross, John Blackburn, Madeline J., Marty Garza, Matt in Delaware, Allison Cook, Super Inframan, 36 Dingo, Andrew Nichols, Matthew Sproul, Marthartha, Midnight Review presents Christine, a blue 2nd Gen MR2 drifting around a Japanese mountain, Patricia Giaquinta, American Rambler, Andrew Maines, Ann Witowski, Barbara Fisher, Beverly Williamson, Billuminati, Bright Rectangle, Charles Davis, Charles in Florida, Land of the Crazy and Communicable, Corey Nelson, Craig Parmenter, Diane B., MTK, Eric Citron, Eric Todd, History and Coffee, J. Otto Bullitt, Jack Huntington, James Lindsay, Jim and Sophie, John Mattingly, John Bracken, Jonathan Frost, Carla Mahoney, Kevin Shurek, Cool Kitty, Kristen L., Laser Printer Jam, Lauren McLean, Linda from Michigan, Linz Jackson K., MJ Armstrong, Mark Shoemaker, Mark Brady, Paul Jeffries, Perry Peters, Philosopher of Mirrors, Riker and Stark, Ron Dupre, Sam Sharon, Sarah Horgan, Sasha McHale, Schmooples, Devourer of Mortal Souls, Stacy Sherwood, Stevie Norman, Strange Stories with the Seeker and Skeptic podcast, Tactical Therapist, Taylor Bell, Thunderboy, Tyler Glimstead, Varush K., Victoria, Vincent Treewell, Will Gebhard, Will Powell, Ren Collier, Annabelle Smith, Caroline Walker, TDT Skunkworks, Craig Sagastumi, and Matthew Brown. Thank you all so very, very much for your support. All right, we did not record a Patreon segment for this one, but I have some stuff I've been holding back that I haven't got a chance to put up yet, so hopefully I'll have that up for you in a day or so. If you're a patron, you'll get that, and we'll see which one I pick. I have a bunch of stuff I really got to get out there, and unfortunately not had the time to edit things the way I want to. I do want to welcome a couple of new patrons, Mick M. and Nick Valenzuela. Thank you both for joining me and joining the rest of the patrons on Where Did the Road Go. If you want to become a patron, just go to wheredidtheroadgo.com and click on the big Patreon link. See you next time. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.